Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
This is Initiated Survivor, where we share survivors' voices and our stories of recovery and reclaiming our power. I'm Kelsey Harper. I'm a clinical psychologist and a survivor, and I like to share helpful tips and skills about recovery from trauma. As a community of survivors, we have tremendous power to change the world, so thank you so much for being here. Here we discuss stories and information that is relevant to survivors of gender-based violence and sexual violence. These topics may be triggering and are for adult ears only, so please be mindful of your needs throughout. Welcome back to Initiated Survivor, everyone. I am here with a good friend of mine, Arielli. She's here to share with us a little bit more about her story and some of the work that she is offering people out in the world, and just share some of the insights that she built from her recovery story. I love getting a chance to share more survivor stories with the community. I think the more that we bear witness to each other, we connect with each other, we can be an even stronger community. So thank you so much, April, for being here.
Kelsey, I'm excited to be here. I'm really appreciative for you having me here. As you said, it's really important to connect with the community and share these stories.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you reached out and we connected on this. And so, we'll just go ahead and get started with sharing a little bit more about who you are and what's bringing you here today and anything that you'd like to tell us.
I am Arielli. I'm a life, relationship, and career coach. Now, I've been a lot of things in the past, and I think we'll talk about that later. But now I guide my clients through challenging life transitions. I help them overcome self-doubt, insecurities, and empower them really to dream of the things they were afraid to dream of and then to achieve those dreams.
Nice. I love that. Dream the things that they were afraid to dream of and start to work towards those. I think that's especially really relevant for survivors, like so many things that we end up letting go of or grieving the loss of, thinking that it's just not going to happen in our lives. So one of the ways that you and I got in contact through this, we were friends long before I started this podcast. And then I kind of reached out and been like, hey, I'm doing this thing, do people want to participate? And you reached out and said, hey, I actually am a survivor too. And I think what's really important and interesting about that story, it's something that I share with people all the time, is you don't know who the survivors are in your life. We don't introduce ourselves in that way. And we don't often talk about it just because of the way that our culture and our community has shaped us around keeping these kinds of things extremely, extremely private. And so there's this experience. What I tell people is this, pass along the information, post the post, say the thing, because you don't know who you might be talking to. You don't know that they might be a survivor, and that sharing that is letting them know that you're a safe person. Even if they don't then open up to you, it's still really useful and helpful because it's creating a different culture. And I feel like this is evidence of that, in the sense that we knew each other for years and didn't know this about each other at all. And this is some of our own shared history.
You talked about when you started this project, and yeah, I was surprised. And I had that moment of, oh my God, we have known each other for years. I can't even remember when we met, but it was over a decade ago, and we had no idea. And you're right, we don't introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm April, and I was sexually assaulted. That's not how it works. But it was really brave of you to start this. And I'm thankful that you did, because when I connected with you about it, I was still hesitant to talk about it. So through this, you've empowered me to be open and to own it and say, yeah, here I am. And I'm okay talking about it now.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think that's so great. That's one of the biggest goals that I have for doing something like this podcast, is to make it so that these stories can be shared and that we can connect with each other. And I think one of the things that has stood out to me with my own experience and with hearing everybody's stories is that despite that we don't talk about it because it's not something that we introduce ourselves with, it's not a part of our identity, it is a significant part of our lives, recovering from trauma in this way. That everyone that I talk to can share about how much time, energy has been committed to recovering, to learning more about themselves, to healing, to integrating how this trauma recovery experience has impacted who they are and where it's kind of leading them to in the rest of their lives. And so it's interesting because it ends up meaning that there's a huge chunk of ourselves ourselves that we actually don't really share with people, like that even people really close to us may not totally understand all of the things going on and like motivations behind certain things. And so I'm really appreciative that you're here and that we're getting to have this conversation. And I know one of the things that we wanted to start with is to share a little bit about your recovery story. And so, you can start wherever you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about you.
So I guess you could say I was pretty much living the dream in LA. I had moved out there to be an actress and I did it. I was a member of the Screen Actors Guild and that was amazing. I always struggled with self-confidence. And so doing that was a challenge. And I really felt authentic in that it made me feel good being an actress and just putting my face out there. And it gave me a lot of self-confidence. I transitioned into marketing for one of the largest entertainment studios in the world. I'll leave the name out, but I think you know who it is. So I felt great about myself in general and was just enjoying life. And in 2008, somebody that I had dated briefly assaulted me. He raped me. We dated very briefly for about a month and I thought he was great. He was charming. He was funny, all the things, ticking off boxes. He was also in the entertainment industry. So we had a lot in common. He had broken up with me to go back to his ex-girlfriend and that hurt. But I tried to be the bigger person. He wanted to stay friends. Some people just say that, but he seemed very genuine about it. So being the bigger person, like, okay, cool. You have the right to choose who you want to be with and I can be your friend. As I said, we had a lot in common. So his birthday had come around and it was just a few weeks after the breakup and I had bought him a gift. I thought, I'll be nice. I'll get him a gift. I let him know, hey, I have something for you for your birthday. He invited me to his place. Okay. So of course, I've dialed myself up. There is that part of, like, okay, you broke up with me. We're still friends, but I'm going to look good. So I had done.
I'm going to make you regret it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's be honest. It was a bit of that. So yeah, I had spent all day with my hair and my makeup and the smoky eyes that I knew he loved. Nice skirt, top. Go over there and invited me in. Everything was fine. I didn't feel off in any way. I didn't feel like anything was off. He was introducing me to a new video game he was playing and asked me to play. He set up a character. It was a lovely time. It was fine. And it was very platonic, as it should have been, because we were just friends. He went to get a beer. And I started thinking, I've spent enough time here. I need to excuse myself because he's, mind you, also in a relationship. And I didn't ask, does she know that you have a friend over or anything? So he came back from getting a beer and I had picked up my purse to say thank you and I have to go. And that's when he attacked me. He would not let me leave. He started kissing me. I pushed him away or tried to, and it became very aggressive, very violent. Very quickly. I was shocked. I don't recall ever saying no. In my head, all I could think was get away. And I tried like hell to get away. The aftermath, I had bruises all up and down my arms and on my body. So I fought like hell, but I couldn't overpower him. At some point, I remember being face down on the floor. A few of my fingernails had broken on flooring. And in my head, I realized I'm hurting myself more than I am hurting him or even getting close to getting away and stopping this. That's when I disassociated. That's when my brain left my body. Survival mechanism, just escape mentally and survive this. I don't think I can say I don't think he would have killed me or, gone beyond that, but who knows? When somebody becomes that violent, I don't know what he was capable of. I thought I knew this person and obviously I didn't. So afterward, this is the weird thing. He went to the corner of the room and he looked like a guilty child standing in the corner. It was really odd. I got all of my things together and just ran out the door. He lived in a very nice area. It was an apartment complex, more like bungalows with a beautiful courtyard. It was the middle of the day. When I got outside, I wanted to literally run, but I was afraid to. I was afraid that other people would see me and say something. I think that's a very odd reaction to have, maybe just self-preservation. I don't know. And you can speak to that maybe later. But yeah, I remember walking quickly and trying to be inconspicuous to get out of there. I got into my car, locked the doors. I was completely shaken, but I didn't want to sit there because I was afraid he might come out to try to talk to me or whatever. So I drove around the block and parked somewhere else just to kind of calm down and assess what had just happened, because it all happened so fast that now that I had a minute to myself, everything was just clicking into place of what just happened. And I'm crying and shaking. I remember thinking, what am I supposed to do? Should I call the cops? Should I go to the hospital? And this was 2008. So things have changed a lot since then. So at that time, as soon as I thought about calling the police, I'm going through my head and I'm like, first of all, they're going to say, well, what happened? Okay, well, I was just raped. Okay, what's his name? Who is he? Whatever. And I'm going to think, okay, well, they're going to want to know how I knew him. I dated him and I went over there to give him a gift and I looked like, and as that thought occurred, what do I look like? Because I had, in my head, I had done my hair and makeup, skirt, everything. I pulled my visor down to look at my face and I've got makeup just everywhere. And I'm like, I look like a crack whore. I look like a prostitute. I look like I was asking for it. And that's what I thought that they would say or think and that they would dismiss it. And I still was trying to convince myself to report it. I thought, okay, do I call 911 from my cell phone? Well, at this point, it's not as much of an emergency. So maybe I should just go to a police station. Do I go to one here? Do I go to one near my house? And it just became too much to even figure out or think through. I abandoned it. I want to go home. I want to go home where I feel safe, where I feel anything but this. So I went home and never told anyone, never reported it. And part of the thinking in the reporting too, I do remember asking myself, did I say no? Because the police are going to want to know that. And because I don't remember ever saying no, I don't think I said any actual words during the whole thing. I mean, I was fighting. I was fighting for my life, fighting to get away. There was no moment of thinking I have to tell him no because that's what's going to stand up in court or whatever. So yeah, I abandoned that thought at all and went home.
Thank you for sharing all of that. That had to have been so terrifying. And especially, I think what's standing out to me is the attempts to try to figure out the next steps, like things that are so complicated, so complex, require a lot of problem solving, that kind of thing. Like, do I call the cops? What do I do next? How do I take care of this? While also being in a state of terror and trauma and trying to come back into things. And I think especially the part where you said, I walked, I didn't run, that there was this kind of sense of like really holding it. That spoke to me. That was my experience too. It felt kind of like you don't want to run away from the mountain lion because the mountain lion's going to chase. And so you're just like shaking as you're walking to your car, just trying to be like, don't make it worse. Don't make it worse. Don't make it worse, whatever it might be, whether it's people paying attention to things, trying to intervene, asking questions, or the person, the attacker coming back out and following and stuff like that. And how scary that had to be. And I think that your experience is one that is so common of being so overwhelmed with all of the things that as survivors are expected to do, like the responsibility we hold for things like making a report, for recovering from this, for saying and doing the exact right thing so that it's like a good, easy kind of report to make, or that it's a easy case for the police to pick up, and having all of that weighing on our minds while we're trying to get out of a dangerous situation. And I think what you shared like just highlights exactly why for so many of us, it just kind of goes into a vault and we don't talk about it again, even if it's on our mind and we can see like what's happening to ourselves and our body and our psychology as we're recovering from it. And people may notice all of those changes, like the experience, what happened, the trauma, it's in a vault, it's gone because we're just having to move forward. That was the decision that was made. Like, I'm just going to move forward and do the next thing.
Yeah. I think when you mention, the terror and trying to get back to the car, I think for me, it was embarrassment too. And that's also putting it in the vault. I clearly remember thinking I didn't want any attention because I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I didn't want to explain to people what happened because, it was embarrassing. And I think that's part of the locks on the vault as well, is realizing, it shouldn't be my embarrassment that this happened. It's not my shame that this happened. It's his.
Absolutely. The thought that would go through my mind with what happened to me was I had these two kind of like repeating thoughts that were kind of like looking back. I'm just like, those were just bizarre, Kelsey, like trauma thoughts. Oh my gosh. And one of them being like that of like, I was tasked as like a woman in this society to prevent that harm from happening to me. Like, we have been trained from the day we were born to do things to make sure that men don't attack us. And I've failed failed. I failed at this. I should have known. And there were a lot of things that would reflect that thought, whether it was, what responsibility I held. Did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Did I do or say anything that could have led to cause this? Because of course, like as a woman, I was supposed to prevent this. And I think that's what leads so many of us to feel shame and embarrassment around it, is because culturally we put so much responsibility on women. And there is this expectation that like people who rape are just people who are running around in the world and it just happens and you have to dodge, and you have to be really, really good at dodging. And if you're not, like it's because you didn't follow the rules or you weren't skilled enough. And even though the reality is we know that's not true, that the majority of women have experienced sexual assault, that a huge number of men have experienced sexual assault, that huge number of trans people have experienced sexual assault. This is not an us problem, but we do like internalize that belief, like this is my fault that I didn't prevent this, didn't stop this, and feel a tremendous amount of guilt and shame. And then my other thought, and this is maybe more of just like, whether it's like being a Virgo or someone who likes to have a lot of control of things, it's just like, I did not plan for this to happen in my life. I was not planning for big major trauma. So like, what am I supposed to do now? Because I did not make any like kind of backup plans for like when this happens, here's how you're going to live life now. And on one hand, that was just kind of that weird like cognitive distortion around like I have control over my life just shattering. And on the other hand, it also taught me a lot about like, okay, but you actually can still move. You can still do things and you didn't plan for this, but that's actually not what you need right now. What were some of the things that, really helped you with your recovery?
It took some time. As I said, I had a lot of confidence before this. And with what happened to me, it made me feel absolutely worthless. Everything that I had worked so hard to build for myself, moving to LA, pursuing that dream of being an actress, which is extremely difficult, creating this beautiful life for myself, I had felt so good about it. And it was mine. In that moment, it felt like everything was just stripped away from me. My self-confidence down the tank. It was gone. I felt absolutely worthless. I fell into severe depression. Immediately after that, I remember I would go to work and go home, go to work and go home. And this took place in July of 2008. July in Los Angeles, for anyone who doesn't know, the weather is extremely hot. It's excruciating. It's like 118 degrees. I was wearing long sleeve shirts and slacks to work because, as I mentioned earlier, I ended up with bruises all up and down my arms. I say, thankfully, he didn't bruise anything from the neck up, but maybe in hindsight, maybe it would have been better if he had, because then maybe somebody would have asked me, what is that from? Maybe I would have gotten some support, because I certainly wasn't asking anybody to help me. I didn't want to tell anyone, but if the evidence had been out there, then maybe somebody would have forced me to seek help. But I would go to work, I would go home. I was hardly eating at the time because I didn't even want to go to the grocery store. I didn't want anybody to look at me. And that's an extremely hard thing for somebody who was an actor. That was part of the joy of being in the entertainment industry, is that I took pride in people looking at me, talking to me, interacting with me. That was who I was. And again, that was taken. At some point, I realized I had to do something. And I'm going to be very careful how I say this. I was not suicidal, but I did not want to live. I didn't care what happened to me. I almost hoped that something would happen to me to end that pain that I was in. And realizing that, I did start to look for ways to move, to at least move, to get off the couch. I had a membership at the Burbank YMCA, and they have some really great programs, including yoga. I've done yoga. I had done yoga in the past, but I didn't know the different styles of yoga. The only yoga class that fit into my schedule was a Kundalini yoga. Kundalini yoga is very interesting. There's a lot of mantras and chanting, and it can be a very emotional yoga to practice. I showed up to the class not knowing anything. I don't know if the instructor always says this to newcomers or if she saw something when she looked at me, but she welcomed me. She gave me a little background on it. And she said, it's okay if you don't participate in any of the movements. It's okay if you lay down on your yoga mat. And I don't want to cry when I say this. The first few classes, I didn't do much of the kriyas. But when she told me that, she said, a lot of times the energy that's created in the room from everyone else can be healing. And that's enough. If you can just come and sit, it's enough. So I started going every week and got into doing the practice myself. There were times I would be doing a chant or a kriya along with everyone else, and I would just have tears streaming down my face. It was very healing. I also joined the boxing class that they offered there. That was more for anger management. I was extremely angry. After kind of clearing some of the fog, I became angry. And I needed to release that. And that feeling of helplessness, I needed to resolve that. So taking the boxing gave me some sense of maybe being able to defend myself a little better, build some strength, and to get out some of the aggression that I felt afterwards. That was a great class. It was taught by a coach who had a boxing club in Burbank, and he volunteered at the Y to teach these 2-hour-long classes. So that was amazing. Beyond that, there was an interesting thing that prior to the assault, my birthday before the assault, I had done a tandem skydive. I had always wanted to try skydiving, and a friend who was, a skydiver had said, come down to this drop zone and I'll get a discount on my jumps and you can have a birthday tandem. And I'm like, that's awesome. Okay. So I went, I paid for it to, be videoed. It was the most amazing experience that I had ever had. There's so many thoughts that are going through your head when you're flying up in the plane. You're scared. You've got all this anxiety. You're just like, what the hell am I doing? Once your body leaves the plane, all those thoughts disappear. When you are in free fall and there is nothing around you, and you're looking, you can literally see the earth below you and separate from you. It just changes your perspective on things. When I did that tandem, as soon as I landed, I was like, I'm doing this again. And I turned around and did a second tandem that same day. I loved it so much. So after the assault, going through the depression and all this self-doubt and just the insecurities, it was one of the days that I had gone home and I wasn't going to go out anywhere. I was watching DVDs. Back then, everything was on DVDs, not live streaming. My hand came across that skydiving tandem DVD and I threw it in just to watch it. And some of those feelings of joy that I had when I initially did it kind of came back, not completely, but there was that remembrance of something better, something that I enjoyed. And I decided then, I said, you know what, I'm going to become a skydiver. So the next day at work, I'm Googling, how do I do this? What do I need to do? How much is it going to be? I couldn't afford it, but I knew I had to make it happen. So I called the place and signed up. Next thing I know, I'm in a class learning how to save my own life while jumping out of an airplane. I hope you don't mind profanity, Kelsey, but I was scared shitless. Terrified, like, what the hell am I doing here? Oh my God. But after that first day of learning all the things, and I'll be honest, I didn't care if I lived or died. They teach you all the things to be aware of. If your canopy doesn't open, this is how you're going to do this and do that. And if there's a problem with the canopy, you might have to, I listened. I'm like, yeah, of course, I'll try, but do I care? No. Didn't care. So after the first jump, learning to get my license, it was not tandem. There was an instructor on each side during free fall. But as soon as they break away and you open your canopy, you're on your own, all by yourself. It was amazing. Again, I had that same feeling of seeing the world differently, just soaring under this beautiful canopy, looking for birds. Everything is just so peaceful and serene. And all that crap that was inside of me from what had happened disappeared. I landed, still scared, but after landing, I had a smile on my face. It lasted maybe 10 minutes, I guess, maybe from the time of landing to walking off of the landing zone. And then some of those horrible feelings started to come back, but that was okay. I had that brief window of not thinking about it, not feeling worthless. And in fact, I built a little bit of confidence in doing that. I was like, look what I just did. I'm a fucking badass. I can do this. So I continued with it. And little by little, it felt like every jump, every weekend that I spent there, which was every weekend, every time I did that, every time I jumped out of an airplane and saved my own life, it brought more joy, piece by piece. And I started to smile more. And it lasted longer and longer. I was a skydiver for 4 years. I can't remember now. By the time I quit, I no longer needed it to feel alive. When I started, it helped me feel alive again. And then I got to a point where I started to care about life after all. I was like, okay. And I had a scary incident that happened towards the end of my skydiving years, which made me realize I wanted to live. And that was part of the decision in leaving skydiving, is that I loved it dearly, but I wanted to live again. It's strange telling these things because I know you knew me. I know you knew me back then.
That's what I was thinking too.
And I would love to hear your thoughts on that time.
What I remember most was that, like, my sister and I would be like hanging out or doing something. And I'd be like, well, is April going to join us? And she's like, no, she's skydiving. And I was like, she's always skydiving. I didn't know that was a thing that people do like consistently. And it was just like this period of time where you were just busy all the time skydiving. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I think that, at the time, I didn't necessarily think anything of it because it's like, okay, like April has a hobby.
Some people knit, some people skydive.
And it also did not surprise me because I always thought of you as someone who like would really approach big experiences. And I think hearing the context around it really shifts that away from it being about like, this is part of April's character as someone who likes to approach like really big experiences, like with courage and like really big activating experiences, and more just like you were doing whatever you could to stay alive and to feel alive. And I mean, in that, like, I absolutely can feel that too, of that sense of like doing anything to come back to life. And for a long while before that, like I had a similar experience where it's just like you're dead to the world and you don't care if anything were to happen. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything to try to die. But, wouldn't it be like tragic if like this is where my life ends and like, well, whatever kind of thing, and then this sense of like, okay, well, I don't want life to be this anymore. Like I do want to feel a little bit more alive and kind of like almost like following that teeny tiny little spark to where it goes. And it sounds like for you, this story was around how skydiving really ignited you and brought you back to life. And it makes a lot of sense then. Of course, like anyone would want to be going and doing that thing that makes them feel alive all the time that they possibly can.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting time in life. As you mentioned, I would hang out with you and your sister. When I started skydiving, I felt like I had two lives going on. I was living and working in LA during the week, and on the weekends, I would drive 3 hours down to the drop zone. For those that don't know, that's the place that you skydive at. And I was working there and skydiving. That's how I was able to fund my new passion, my obsession. So it was two different lives. And pretty early on, as I was still getting the training to be a licensed skydiver, I was meeting these different people who didn't know me. They didn't know my history. They didn't know where I came from, who I was before the incident. They had no expectations of me and no judgments. And I think I look back and I wonder, what their first perception of me was. I was probably a bit of a bitch because I didn't really want to get to know anyone. I went in there like, this is what I'm doing. As I met some of them, they were amazing people. Oh my gosh, just the different walks of life. They come from all over the world. They come with their own stories. And oddly enough, a lot of the people that I met, and I'm not going to say all, but quite a few that I met during that time had very similar experiences of not wanting to live. That something had happened to them at some point where they were at that same devastation and they got into skydiving, and that kept them going. And during that time, there was, yes, I'm meeting a lot of people and a lot of them are very good looking. The drop zone was a hot zone, it was like people are walking around. Oh my gosh. Normally when you skydive, you wear some sort of, if you're doing formation jumping, you wear a full suit. And again, it's extremely hot in the summertime. So I would be walking around with it hanging around my waist, bikini top. There are men running around shirtless or in boxers. And it's just like, woo. There was one instructor in particular who introduced himself almost immediately. He was flirting with me. I was a very flirtatious person before everything happened. I dated a lot, as you know, because I used to sit around a table with you and be like, what this guy did? And what do you think about that, Kelsey? I was surprised that I wasn't bothered by him hitting on me and coming on to me. He asked me out and I said yes. I didn't have any hesitation about that. And it may have been partly because of who he is. And I found that out later, but he was a very Zen person. I'm not going to say his name, keep it all anonymous, but I loved him. Not like in love, like love of my life. I just loved him because he didn't push anything. he was so open and welcoming, an amazing guy. And so I went out with him that first date. It was very cliche. It was like 80s, let's create an 80s movie. He had his motorcycle. And of course I hop on the back, and we're riding around. We go to the restaurant. He introduced me to the rest of the gang. There was a very popular clique at the drop zone, and he was a part of that. They were amazing people. We had a great time. He drives me up around this mountain because there's a mountain next to the drop zone. It's so beautiful. It's totally, you can hear, the music playing in the background. He parks at this scenic overlook. There's other people there. It wasn't like, he's trying anything. He's just putting out all the moves. And we sat there and watched the sun go down, and I felt good with him. I knew I could trust him. We go back to the drop zone, and he's like, well, this is amazing. And he went in for a kiss, and that was great. He's like, what do you want to do now? And Kelsey, I looked right at him and I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, I'd like to fuck you. I had no hesitation. It didn't bother me. And we started a kind of relationship that I didn't hold any expectations on from that moment. And every time I went there, he had an RV. A lot of regulars or instructors had RVs at the drop zone so they could stay overnight. I never assumed I was going to stay with him. I would always go to the bunkhouse and he would come in and be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm setting up my stuff for the weekend. He's like, you're staying with me. Come on. I guess maybe like a stray cat getting lured in with little treats and food, he like roped me in. And that also helped in my healing process. I don't think that I would have not trusted men in general. I don't think that what happened to me broke that trust as far as sexual intimacy goes. However, I saw people differently after that. I think having that realization that there could be a monster inside of somebody, I would hold my breath waiting for that to show up. I didn't feel that with my skydiver boyfriend at the time. So that was healing and being able to let go of that expectation that he's going to turn. I still have some of that as far as relationships go. I see people as a multidimensional, well-rounded person, which is how we should be seeing people. Because that's what we are as humans. We all have these capabilities in us, whether it's something great or something really horrible. So I do have that awareness, but he helped me learn to start loving again and trusting. And that was really impactful for me.
That's so beautiful. And it definitely, I'm hearing a lot of like the Top Gun soundtrack in my mind as you're like flying by on the back of this motorcycle.
In all of this, I think you said something about it earlier, choosing how we move forward. Doing the skydiving was something that I was able to choose. It was a risk that I could choose to have versus the danger and risk that I was forced into. And that was really important for me to rebuild my confidence and to reclaim my life. I'm choosing to do this really dangerous thing and harness that power to take it back. I can make my choices. And that's part of why I love doing what I do as a life coach. All these things that I've done in my life. You mentioned that you knew me as this person who likes to make big choices. And that's who I was before. That's who I've always been. Accidentally or unwittingly, I was creating my own life from childhood. I didn't know how I was doing it. I was just doing it out of just sheer will and determination. And it was hard. It's been hard doing all those things and recovering from an assault all by myself without any given tools that were pointed out. Hey, this is what you can do to change your situation. Now, as a life coach, I can recognize what I was doing and I'm able to help other people identify what tools and resources do you have. Can I point out to you to help you motivate you or move you in that direction that you want to do? That's just become my passion and being able to champion them along their journey.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think that's a nice way of kind of segueing into what are some of the offers and contributions that you're bringing back. I think one of the main themes whenever I talk to survivors is that we all kind of turn around and say, like, I want to do something to help or to change the world, to bring about more justice, to create more safety, to help others like me, that kind of thing. That trauma recovery ends up being very galvanizing for all of us. And your story is very similar in that way. So can you share a little bit more about your coaching and how you got into that, what it is that you provide for folks, that kind of thing?
Yeah, as chance would have it, I met somebody who was a life coach. I didn't know what that was. He told me about it. And in talking together, he mentioned to me, that I seemed like I would be a natural fit for life coaching. I blew it off at the time. Later on, as things changed in my life, I became a mother. I gave up my marketing career. I've been out of that industry for almost 10 years now. And now that the kids are bigger, as they were growing, I started to realize, okay, what can I do at home so that I'm still with them, helping to raise them, but to recreate employment for myself? And life coaching came back to mind. And part of it may have been in reflecting all the things that I was able to do in my own life. Like, how can I give that to other people? You can't just wrap it up in a little box and give it away. So I'm like, life coaching, that's a way to do that. So I took the training, became certified, and I continue to up level all the time. I have other personal experiences that led me into relationship coaching. I became certified in that. And a common theme as I work with clients that comes up is their careers, unhappiness, or trying to re-enter employment, etc. So I became certified as a career coach. So that's where the life, relationship, career coach comes in. I feel like you're right. After a traumatic experience like that, it did change me in wanting to give back. I get a lot of joy out of helping other people that are struggling. They have something they want to do. They want to change something in their life, even if it's perception. It may not be, the career or the relationship stuff. It might be just how they see things themselves or the world around them. I enjoy helping them through that process, similar to what I went through, but much easier. I went it the hard way by myself. I can be there to make it a lot easier for other people to change their self-doubt, their negative self-talk of, I can't, it's impossible, I can't do that, I'm not good enough. I love being able to come in and help them see a different way of themselves and the world around them. As far as what I offer, I can be found at aprilarielli.com. I'm also on Instagram at aprilarielli. I always offer 30 minutes free with me. It's called Take the First Step. If you go to my website, it's the only thing you can click to schedule into. Take the first step. And that's literally it. You take the first step in changing your life, in enjoying your life. And it's absolutely free.
That's a wonderful offer. Free 30 minutes with triply certified life coaches. Amazing. And I think one of the things that stood out that you said that I really liked too is like that part of getting into life coaching, the way you were describing it was in line with that kind of reclaiming some power in your life, of like, I need and I want to do something for me in my life. I need and I want to get employment, and we could do anything, but I'm going to design something specifically for me. And I think that's really, really beautiful too. It's very much similar to all the other experiences you had around figuring out what it is that's going to work for you and what it is that's going to be life-giving for you and bringing that in. I think that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, we've talked about a lot. We've covered a lot of deep and rich things. So we'll go ahead and maybe close it out here. Thank you so much, April, for being here and sharing your story. The links for connecting with April are going to be in the show notes, so you can definitely track those down there. And yeah, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Sam Valentine and her team at Fast Forward Productions for editing, producing, publishing, and all-around podcast magic that makes this podcast possible. If you found something that resonated with you, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. This simple but meaningful action really helps increase the visibility and accessibility of this podcast to survivors and allies that may be looking for some support and connection. I love connecting with listeners and allies, so please feel free to share this episode on your socials and go ahead and tag me in it at Initiated Survivor or at Kelsey J. Harper. A final but very important note: while I am a clinical psychologist, this episode and this podcast does not constitute professional mental health care or therapy, nor is it a replacement for professional therapy. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The podcast host and the guests are not rendering professional advice and should not be considered to have developed a professional relationship. If you are looking for mental health care or professional help, please seek it out. We have some links in the show notes that may help you with that, or you can contact your insurance carrier directly for referrals.